Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Megan. I'm the faithful fibromyalgia warrior. And I'm so glad you guys are here. Those of you who are joining live, anybody who watches this in replay, thank you so much for your support. So, there isn't any particular theme for today, any particular topic. But I just wanted to have a quick catch up, if you will, before I go get dinner started and all that kind of thing. It is February the 5th, just before 5 here in England. And I was reminded today about all the things I have in my life to be thankful for, all the things to be grateful for. And yes, I was reading that this morning. So as a group, our church group has a theme this year about praising God, praying to God, praising God, like through song and other forms of worship, and also being in God's presence and learning what that means, how to be guided by the Spirit. And so it's been really great. And we've been looking into some of the Psalms from the book of Psalms. And if you don't know what that is, and maybe you don't, it is actually spelled Psalms. So I used to think it was called the book of Psalms because that's how it's spelled. So that would make sense, right? But it's very creative. 73 of them are attributed to King David, meaning he wrote them or he spoke them and had someone else transcribe. And then the rest are different authors. But the ones, especially from him, are just really beautiful moments where he is thanking God for all of his blessings. He is writing moving poetry, or he is realizing he has to go before God because he hasn't and he needs God's help. And it was great because I knew that the psalm we were going to look at today was Psalm 143. And so I read that earlier this morning. And we talked about it a little bit more in service today. And I just wanted to share it because I don't know. I think it's pretty and crazy. I think it's pretty amazing. Blah, not crazy, amazing. What we read, but I also kind of wanted to just share. I get from BibleGateway.com. I get sent like a verse of the day, so a different verse every day. And today it was Psalm chapter 33, verses 4-5, which says, "The word of the Lord is right and true. He is faithful in all he does. The Lord loves righteousness and justice, and the earth is full of his unfailing love." And which is so encouraging. But I realize it's so easy for me to feel like just because I don't get what I want, that doesn't mean that God is not showing his love, right? And I had to remember that although God himself loves justice and righteousness, he has given us all the greatest gift as humans, which is we have free will. We can choose to follow him or not follow him. We can choose to walk in the light or not. It is our choice. We're not forced to do it, which is amazing. But I also remember those years where I was not making good choices. I wouldn't want to go back there. I didn't realize how bad some of my choices were at the time. I mean, before I came to understand who God was, I sat down with somebody who became a good friend. We studied out some scriptures together. I came to understand what it meant to be a Christian. And then I became one, made changes in my life. And I don't want to ever have to go back. But through all of that, through all the times when I had said, no, I'm not interested in church. No, I don't want to know God right now. Now is not a good time. All the times I said no, or I put other things first, God still loved me. How do I know this? Because I'm still here. He didn't give up on me. So even when things were going wrong in my life because of my own choices, he was still there. And we sort of talked about that a bit today at service, which was really, really cool, I thought, and super encouraging. And you know what? It was great when we got out. I had lunch with a very dear friend of mine. She pushed me in my wheelchair because the electric one I have does not fold down easily to fit in the car. So took the wheelchair with us. My husband and son were spent time with her husband, and she and I went and we had coffee and we grabbed lunch and we just talked life and having grown children and what it's like now. And she's about 2 years old. 2 years. She's about 10 years older than I am. Very cool. And we were talking about how even now, having been Christians for so long, we can still fall into the traps of anxiety. We can still fall into bad choices because we think we know better. And in spite of those things, isn't it great to know that God still loves us and He's always there waiting for us to smarten up and, behave the way we're supposed to. And we had a really great talk. She herself does not have an addictive type personality. I know her husband does, and there's some certain things that he's had to overcome, as has mine. But what I was able to talk about was my own addictive personality, how my addiction, some people might not even think it is an addiction, that being processed junk food and sugary carbs. Um, but that's my addiction. And I can't moderate. And to be honest, I don't want to eat carbs and sugar in moderation. I don't want to eat it at all because I know how bad it is for my body. And I'm so thankful that I have found out this truth, right? Some people say there are some people who feel like, hey, you eat everything in moderation. And you know what? If you can eat some things and they don't seem to bother you, and you really do limit the junk like to a very small amount, but you eat mostly animal products, being the skeletal muscle meat, maybe organs if you like them. Um, if you also enjoy things like eggs and dairy, if you can tolerate them, awesome. I mean, all of these things are gifts from God. He created not just the cattle and the wild animals, the livestock, all the fish and all the birds, all of those things came from Him. So whether you believe in God as I do, that being the God of creation, the God of Jesus, or you believe in some sort of a God, something greater than yourselves, I think what matters most, at first at least, is that we have to acknowledge there is something beyond us that has made the world we live in. Yes, humans built buildings and discovered technology and, medical science and medications and all those things. And they all have a place in our lives. They all do. They're all helpful or enjoyable or in some cases necessary, meaning some medications are necessary. It is not necessary that we have an iPhone, although I hear they're great. My husband's got one and another one through work. I'm happy with my little Samsung Galaxy. Does what I need it to do. I'm quite good with it. I don't need anything else beyond that. And I find it easier to navigate. I'm not super tech. Let's be honest. I'm not super techy, okay? So those are great forms of entertainment. We can access information very quickly. And those old days where if you wanted to find something out, you had to go to a library. You had to look it up somewhere. There was a day where they didn't even have catalogs on a computer, even an old computer. You had to go through the card catalog. You had to have an idea of the topic you wanted to look up and then see if there were books on the shelves that would help you look at that topic. I'm 50 and a half. I remember those days. Book reports, you had to go to the library. You had to, because no one had the information at home. There was no internet, nothing, right? So I remember those days of having to go to an actual library, look at actual books, and do research. And then, you'd have to jot down all the information for your bibliography and all that kind of stuff. Now there's Wikipedia, which is not necessarily reliable, but you get my point. You can look stuff up online. Or even if you do have to still get actual books from a library, they all have, to some degree or other, a computerized system for looking up books, right? So there are some modern things that are very helpful and enjoyable and entertaining. And it's easy to forget the world that exists outside of that. It's easy to forget, oh, right, I'm breathing oxygen in the air above me. And if I'm in the right place, or if it's dark enough and it's not too cloudy, I can see the stars, right? We're here in Colchester. We actually do get to see quite a few stars at night if it's not cloudy. I remember living in Edmonton, Alberta for 3 years when I was younger, as a kid, and a couple of times actually being able to go out back and seeing the northern lights. Not not as bright as if, say, you were up in Scandinavia, Finland or Norway, but we could still see them. And it was amazing. Well, something made that. Didn't just happen. You know, I remember when I was first studying the Bible to understand who God was, who Jesus was, what it was all about. And I said, I said to this one woman who did become a good friend while I was at uni. Her name was Roz, and I said to her, I want to believe. Like, I know there's something outside of me. I didn't make the world. I didn't make all these trees and plants. So how do I have more faith? And she said, just look at nature. Just look around at nature. And it's true, like, of all the very different species of trees, of fungus, of plants, poisonous and non lethally poisonous, of all the kinds of fruits and berries, whether we eat them or not, they were created. Now we've developed technologies where we can, make them stronger, sweeter, larger, etc. But the very first ones, someone made that, something made that, right? God, I believe God made that. All of the fruits, all of every single type of fish, every type of sea mammal, every bird or creature that can fly, every mammal itself that exists, the ones who are ruminants, the ones who aren't, and each one has a purpose. Each and every one has a purpose. And as human beings, we are over them. Like, they are there to serve a purpose for us, whether it is wool that would eventually, become knitted into sweaters and warm clothing, whether it was the leather skins that we would fashion into prehistoric, I don't know, ancient tribe dresses, whether it was the cotton that we learned how to weave and make into linens, right? These types of things evolved over time. They didn't just suddenly appear 100 years ago. They go way back even before the time of Jesus. But the fact that people had cloth, like fabrics that they would make into clothing, togas and so forth, and the robes and whatever. But that came from somewhere. So there had to be a plant that we would eventually learn could be formed, that we would learn how to weave into this material or this fabric that would then become clothing. Whether it was a cloak to keep us warm, whether it was just a toga so we wouldn't be too hot if we happened to live in, say, Jerusalem or Rome. And to me, it's just, wow, it made me stop and think, because it is so easy. It's so easy in this day and age, right, to forget. Um, that there was a time when this stuff didn't exist. I mean, like I say, I remember a time when having to do a project in school, I had to, my mom or dad had to drive me to the library and drop me off for the day, right? Because we didn't have those books at home. There are a few people who maybe their parents would have had a Encyclopedia Britannica. Most people didn't. And even then, you're supposed to get at least two sources, right? So having to actually go to the library to do your research. I remember that. I remember those days. So being able to Google it and look it up online, wow, that's amazing. But I don't want to forget that this wasn't always here. And, as she and I were talking, there's the Bible Project, which does, pardon me, they do all kinds of videos and podcasts and all sorts of really, really great lessons from the Bible. And on each book of the Bible is covered in some way, whether it's what is the Old Testament, what was it called in Jewish times, where did it come from, who helped write it, all those things, which is great, good to know. So it makes it easier to sort of understand the Bible as we go forward. So some of these things are really, really helpful. But then to remember that there was a time where that stuff didn't exist. And yet people still worship God, right? I think about being able to find my way to eating the way I do, to improve my overall health, certainly getting rid of my brain fog, certainly feeling my pain go down and my inflammation go down. But I never would have come across it if it wasn't for YouTube, right? So that's a good thing. The thing is, this way of eating has been around for millennia. This is how humans ate long before I was alive. And so, as great as it is to have the ability to have videos and chat and share stories and ideas and talk about, what we eat in a day or what we like to do or how it's going for us as we're, taking our lives, taking control of our health and trying to be keto or carnivore or even just low carb. The thing is, these are all things that were there long before YouTube existed. And it's kind of interesting how, as humans, we had the right way of eating a healthy diet, that being mostly animal meats, right? With, as I say, maybe some dairy here and there, eggs, probably. They would have eaten anything they could catch, whether it was flying or swimming or in the wild, running on four legs, or it was perhaps even domesticated livestock. Humans ate mostly animal meats and the fat that went with it. Some of them ate organs, some of them didn't. Some of them gave the organs to their animals. But they did eat mostly animal meats and fats. And somehow, over time, as we have evolved to become more highly intelligent in a lot of ways, as we've evolved as human beings, as we've evolved over these millennia to become, I think, overall far more intelligent beings or capable of greater intelligence, somehow we became less intelligent when it came to what we put in our mouths. And I'm not sure why that is. I don't. I wish I did. It amazes me. It amazes me to think that we have evolved over all this time, and as we seem to be apparently more intelligent over our evolution, in all ways except how we nourish our bodies. And in that respect, no, we have not. All this fake meat and hydrogen, what is it they call it? Hydrogenized palm oils and trans fats and margarines and seed oils. And no, that is not helping. It's not going to help anybody. Here we go, Dhruv Jane. Well, agriculture, yes. However, the thing about agriculture is the plants initially were there to feed the animals, right? And it would have been, oh, plants don't run away. That's true. However, no. The thing is that plants would have been something you could eat, like say a bit of fruit, maybe vegetables. Most likely, most of the people at that time, if they were eating anything, it would have been tubers, and they would have actually soaked them, or essentially they would have pickled them for up to 3 weeks before eating them, because they knew that if they didn't, it would be toxic to them. And agriculture was basically what had happened was at the end of the last ice age, human beings ended up killing off most of the large animals, the mastodons and that type of thing, that were slow and easy to catch. And so if they wanted to eat meat, and anthropological science and isotope studies will show that this is actually true, that they did eat mostly meat and animal fat to go with it. If they wanted to catch animals, they had to come up with better ideas and plans. So they had to develop, we had to develop weapons for hunting the animals. We had to develop, a way of cutting up the animal better, being able to share the meat out further. And plants may not run away, but plants have their own defense mechanism, which is they have toxins within them and oxalates. Some of them affect us much more than others. For example, I cannot eat any plants of any kind. I do not handle plants whatsoever. I love vegetables. I've always loved them, but they've always caused me issues. So I cannot eat them. I had to eliminate all of that in order for my IBS to start to heal. So the whole idea of agriculture was, we discovered that the animals were feeding on the grasses. And of course, as humans evolved and we built ourselves shelters and then actual homes and dwellings, well, we learned how to domesticate the animals. And in order to be able to keep them in an area that we could oversee, we either had to we either had to build our dwellings near the fields where the grasses and cereals grew, or we had to figure out how to bring those grasses and cereals closer to where our dwellings were. And so that was really how that began. And as human beings, if we did not store up enough fat in our bodies for times of season when there wasn't a lot of meat, or there was a long period in between kills, then they had to find plants that they could eat to avoid complete starvation. And so that is also a part of it. And let's be honest, as humans, what's easier? Figuring out how to catch an animal that's fast and can hide itself, or figuring out a way to make the plant in front of me edible in some way, right? And so that's a no-brainer. I think if you ask most humans, we are probably 10 times out of 10, we're going to pick the option that requires the least amount of effort. So trying to grow different types of cereals and grains that we can potentially eat doesn't mean we're getting a full nutrition out of them, but we can eat them if they're prepared right, versus having to go for 2 weeks or 3 weeks because we're stalking an animal that may only feed us for a few days. Well, yeah, of course, the plants, because they're there. And like you say, plants, they're not going to go anywhere. That doesn't mean that they are the ideal thing for us to eat. They will work to help keep off complete starvation, which is, I think, over time, that's how the human body and certain parts of the world have adapted better than others to certain grains and cereals. If you look at Central and South America, and even the southern part of North America, so Mexico and South, a lot of them are able to eat and manage things like maize, which is a sort of corn, as well as rice and beans, because especially the Aztec people and those who were invaded, so essentially the slaves of the time, well, that's all they were allowed to have, unless they were lucky enough to catch fox or a bird or some fish. They weren't allowed to have any of the big animals that, say, the leaders got, right? The meat was always given to those in power, and the grains and cereals were kept for those who were poor, those who might have been serfs or even slaves. So over time, you can adapt. Yeah, meat was absolutely an elite dish. Absolutely at that time. No, totally true. And because as humans, we're selfish. We are a selfish creation. We just are, and we are always, as a group, looking out for number one, right? So if you're lucky enough to be in the upper echelons, you got meat, and if not, then you got grains, some sort of bread type thing, not obviously not like bread like we get it today, but and so your body will, adapt to some degree to whatever you give it over time. And so somebody who, say, comes from, let's say, Mexico, they will probably do okay if they include rice, or maybe some sweet potato, or perhaps even some cereal grains, because it's what they've gotten used to over time. Doesn't mean they can't go fully to meat, but I'm certain that there must be many of them who do okay with that, at least for a while, because that's what they're used to. That's what they've had culturally. I have noticed, though, and my mother-in-law lived in Mexico for 20 years. And what she said was, yes, everything comes with either rice, beans, tortillas, but a lot of their dishes have either chicken or beef, some pork. So it's not like they were all plants, right? It's just a lot more plant than meat. That's just how things went. And that's in some parts of the world still today, because that's what they can get used to. So is eating grains and cereals ideal? For me, it is not, because I cannot tolerate them. However, there are people who can, and if they can and they are doing well and they are thriving, that's fine. I would say, though, it would be important that they still include meat, right? Because that is where all of those amino acids and muscle building nutrients that our body requires, that we cannot make ourselves, that is where you're going to get most of them from. That is the one source that you can access it easily, and it's easily absorbed into your body, right? Whereas with any kind of plant, the body just has a much harder time processing it. It is just a lot harder to digest. And, some, as I say, some people can get a lot of it or even most of it in small amounts, but to absorb all of the nutrients there that might be there, maybe not. I would think probably not, just because there's also a lot of anti-nutrients and oxalates, because that's their defense mechanism. They can't run away, right? So that's how they want to defend themselves. So I get that, absolutely. But it's amazing to me that as we've evolved as humans, and so, like I say, have we gotten somewhat more intelligent? In some ways, we have become like way less intelligent. Like seed oils, horrible idea, awful idea. You know, what is it? The line from the Grinch? The Grinch had a horrible, awful idea. Yes, seed oils, horrible, full of omega 6, which is not good for the body. Very, 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 very high in inflammatory markers, super high. So things like margarine, any kind of pressed seed oil, whether it's rapeseed, sometimes even olive oil can be an issue for people. Yeah, corn, what is it? Canola oil. Oh, yeah, run from that stuff. It is so bad for you. It is such an inflammatory thing. And yet, we were willing to believe when people told us, oh, no, this stuff's good for you. We didn't know any different. We didn't know any different. Or thinking that, donuts are okay and processed sugar is fine. And yeah, don't worry, saturated fat's going to kill you, but don't worry about sugar. Well, sugar converts in the liver. And if you take in too much, eventually you will develop non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. How do I know that? Because I did. And I wasn't eating loads of processed sugar. I was eating enough. I was eating a lot of fruit. So the fructose is a form of sugar. And also I was getting in glucose through jam and carbohydrates, because all carbs break down into sugar in the liver. And your liver can only hang on to so much sugar, and then you have it pump out into your body as triglycerides, which are really, really bad for you. If those are above a certain level, that can be very dangerous. You are now at risk for cardiovascular disease. You're now at risk for diabetes and all sorts of other potential complications, and it's not worth it. I just wish, that I wish I knew then what I know now, but I'm glad at least now I know it. And I'm realizing I can't feel guilty over things that I couldn't control. It's kind of like, for me, when you get to know what the truth is about God, and before you knew the truth, do whatever you want. You didn't have to feel one way or the other because you didn't know, right? But once you figure out what the truth is, well, then there's no getting away from it. It's like now you've known the truth, there is no going back. Or, think about like from the Matrix. Once you take that red pill, that's it. The truth is the truth, and there's no way to go back. That's just the end of it. It is how it is. And in many ways that's good, but sometimes it is a challenge because you know what's right, you know what's true. And sometimes I do wish I had the ignorance of before, and I could say, oh yeah, I'm just gonna have a brownie. What's this gonna hurt? It's just one pumpkin spice latte with, the whipped cream and the little biscuit. And I can't do it because I know what it's gonna do to me, right? It is gonna cause massive inflammation. It is going to spike my insulin way too high. It is going to make me feel nauseous, give me a massive headache, almost migraines, and it is going to cause my body to hold on to water weight. And in fact, if I'm not careful, it is going to convert whatever sugar is no longer storable in my liver, and it is going to convert that into high triglycerides and fat, which is dangerous. So sometimes I wish I had the ignorance, but in a case like that, ignorance is not bliss. It's not, right? So today, as I was saying, thinking about, looking around and observing that, yes, something made the world we live in. we humans developed and evolved, and we created homes and dwellings and apartments and skyscrapers, and we created like the Shard, and that super tall what is it, a hotel that's in Dubai, and the CN Tower in Toronto, and all these major things, the Eiffel Tower and Arc de Triomphe, all these amazing things were built by people, which is so cool. Absolutely. But somebody had to create us. Somebody had to help us evolve over time. And for me, I believe that's God, the God of Jesus. And that's not what you believe. That's okay. But I think it's when you look out at night, for example, if you're somewhere that you can see the stars up in the sky, if you don't have like light pollution, and you look up at all those stars and think, something greater than me made that. I look up and I think, wow, look at the sunset, or look at the fact the sun is shining today where I am, but it's raining 2 hours from here. That's amazing. Mostly because I'm getting sunshine. But it just reminded me that there is so much to be thankful for in life. And when I get too busy with technology, when I get too wrapped up with, I don't know, whatever's going on with my sons, or how's my husband doing, or what are we up to tomorrow, or are we meeting with so and so the next day? When I get too busy with that, I forget all the ways I've been looked after. And today just reminded me I need to meditate on all of the things that God has done. The person who taught the lesson today had a really great point. He talked about how there's God's works and God's book of works, in other words, his creation, and all of us in it and everything in it, and his words, and in his scriptures. And even without the words, just to look around, literally look outside and to see trees and flowers and bushes and plants, and thinking he knows every single blade of grass in the entire world that ever existed before and that exists now. He made them and he knows them. Same with all the leaves of every tree, of every plant, whether it's a vegetable, a fruit, or a flower. Doesn't matter. And so he has all this amazing power, and yet he loves us as humans. He's given us intellect. He's given us the ability to evolve, to have language, to have intelligence, to have the ability to figure out how to eat food and eat food that's good for us. And yes, he's given us guidelines, and yes, he's given us suggestions, and yes, the animals are on this earth for us to eat. But just the fact that he's looked after us as amazingly as he has, wow, so incredible. That was about it, really. I did say it was going to be a somewhat of a quick one. I don't know, these are just things I was thinking of today, and I just wanted to share with you guys. I don't know. I find the history of stuff like this really fascinating, like super interesting. I don't know if you guys do or not. I hope this was enjoyable and interesting to some degree. Yeah, that's about it. I thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for your likes, your support, your comments, and I will see you guys again in the next one, probably within the next couple of days or so. I have a few things going on with family and friends over the next couple of days, but I will be back, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Thank you so much once again, and take care until next time. Bye for now.